We're going to be looking for slime moulds, which are a group of organisms that look a little bit like small fungi. Some are very small, but really are more closely related to things like the amoeba. And they crawl around in wood and leaf litter and soil, and then come up to the surface of the leaves or the logs and produce fruit bodies, which are often like miniature mushrooms or very, very tiny fir trees, and their spores are dispersed largely by the wind, sometimes by insects. They're often brightly coloured, and some of them are exquisitely beautiful when you see them magnified.
So, can you see any here?
Well, I haven't found any just yet, Hugh, but I am looking at these old branches which have been here for about 10 years now and are beginning to rot nicely. I should say the slime moulds don't actually do the rotting themselves, but they like to live on the bacteria and sometimes the fungi, which are doing the rotting. But so far, this particular pile is not producing anything.
Is it like mushrooms or fungi where they fruit in the same place every year?
It can well be. There's a log just on the other side of the river where I have found the same species occurring in the same week of the year for about 20 years. Now we've got some more logs here, which may be... Aha! Is that looking more profitable? What we can see are a black mass, but covered with a lot of little grey-white surface features, which until we looked at it under the lens we won't be sure, so I'll just have a quick look. It may be, and here you see on my fingers
like soot.
The black sooty spore mass. This is growing on the moss on the fallen trunk. The fruit bodies are stalked, 2 millimetres high, and then they have a sort of rugby ball shaped head, which is about 1 millimetre high and about 1.5 millimetres across, which is grey, covered with limey flakes. And then inside is a mass of little tiny threads with white expansions, which is the apparatus that helps to spread the spores into the air, and then a mass of black spores. But that is a typical colony of a very large genus we call Physarum. I'm afraid they don't have English names, and none of them have Welsh names. The creeping stage, we call it the plasmodium, has probably been inside the wood feeding on bacteria and so on for many months, if not for a year or so. But it's come up through the open texture of the wood onto the surface because it has to disperse its spores into moving air. Some plasmodia are enormous. Here in this particular wood, I've seen them 1 metre square and 2 centimetres thick. And if you work on the basis they probably have the similar density to water, that's 20 kilograms worth of plasmodium. A single cell at that stage with many millions of nuclei. This makes them very different from most other kinds of living organisms. And that mass of, well, it looked like a bucket full of cold porridge thrown over a stump. It's called Brefeldia maxima. It's the biggest slime mould. The word slime mould is really rather a misnomer because they're not slimy and they're not moulds. But it's a name that's stuck with them for well over a century now, and we haven't managed to find a replacement that sounds attractive and is accurate.
It's fascinating what you're telling me about slime moulds, but so what, someone might say?
Well, that's been said to me many times, and I'm very happy that I can now give an answer to that. First of all, we now know that some groups of slime moulds that live in the soil and feed on bacteria are important in releasing phosphate from the bacteria they eat into the soil. And the suggestion is that in the future we might be able to introduce these relatively easily cultured species into deficient soils to increase their fertility. Some slime moulds have been known for a very long time, at least 50 years, to produce antibiotics which are of a different kind from those that we use at the moment. And that means that probably there will be less resistance to them amongst bacteria. And if we can synthesize these and then test them, they might actually be new groups of antibiotics which we urgently need as we're running out of the value of the old ones, particularly with some of the superbugs that are now resistant. There are a number of diseases which are very difficult to treat with modern methods, such as varicose ulcers. And the bacteria which are causing these ulcers are resistant to modern antibiotics, but they would not be resistant to being eaten by slime molds, because being eaten is not something you can easily get resistance to. And it is possible that we can develop a medically friendly slime mold strain that will eat bacteria but not eat the patient. Otherwise we might end up in a sort of Quatermass situation.